Imagine a man who leaves for work in the morning, never knowing that by evening his entire world will be shattered. He returns home expecting warmth, laughter, and the comfort of family, but instead he walks into a silence so heavy it crushes the soul. There is no greater cruelty than stepping out of your home with a full heart and returning to find it hollow forever. Sometimes life doesn't take years to break you. It takes just one evening, one moment, to turn everything into ashes. He thought he was coming back to love, but instead he walked into a darkness that would never leave him. The silence of Ashland Close in Bushey, that summer evening of 9 July 2024, was shattered. 3 lives, each a flicker of warmth and love, extinguished in one devastating assault. Imagine a home filled with laughter, hope, routine. And then, in a heartbeat, everything unravels. Carol, 61, stalwart and kind. Hannah, 28, vivacious and full of bright promise. Louise, 25, gentle-hearted and caring. They were bound not just by blood, but by tenderness, by shared morning routines, shepherding each other through life's daily rituals. And yet on that sunlit afternoon, the quiet turned to terror. They didn't deserve this. None of it. A doorbell echoing false trust, a rucksack hiding weapons, a betrayal so cold it cleaved hearts and shattered communities. And when dawn arrived the next day, families, neighbors, and a devastated father, BBC racing commentator Jon Hunt, were left grappling with the incomprehensible loss of his wife and daughters. This is not just a crime story. It's reverberations of grief, of love lost, of a world abruptly tipped into darkness. Bushey, Hertfordshire, a quiet enclave north of London, harbored the unassuming, warm-hearted Hunt family. Carol Hunt, aged 61, exuded warmth, a nurturing presence in every room she entered. Her daughters, Hannah, 28, a dedicated beautician, known for her gentle laughter and meticulous care. Louise, 25, a talented dog groomer whose soft voice and gentle touch soothed pets and people alike. Their home buzzed with familiarity, morning coffees, friendly chats, laughter with neighbors, and the daily rhythm of ordinary life. Beside them stood Jon Hunt, respected commentator in the racing world, and their elder daughter Amy, who remained fiercely protective of the family's closeness. There had been no trouble, no warnings, until the rupture came from someone they thought they knew. On 26 June 2024, Louise ended her 18-month relationship with Kyle Clifford, then 26, a former soldier. What may have seemed like a painful but ordinary breakup escalated into something darker within the days that followed. Law enforcement would later learn that Clifford began amassing weapons and materials, ordering a Horizon Cornet Mex T405 compound crossbow with bolts, a 10-inch butcher's knife, a replica Glock CO2 air pistol, which never arrived in time, along with duct tape, rope, and petrol. His behavior grew obsessive, tracking where Jon Hunt might be, perhaps anticipating Louise's home coming. In July 2024, 13:40 BST. Clifford parked near the Hunt home on Ashland Close and wasted no time casing the driveway. Over the next hours, tension built unseen. 14-2. Clifford rang the bell, claiming to return Louise's belongings. Carol, unsuspecting, let him in. Once inside, he stabbed her to death, a betrayal made all the more cruel by her kindness. The doorbell camera, and later audio recordings from inside, would capture distorted echoes of normalcy turning into horror. He left the house at 15:07, returning to retrieve his crossbow, concealed under a blanket. The evil calm before the storm had begun, 16:11. Louise returned from her dog grooming work and entered the house, unaware of the trap. Crisis followed. Screams, chaos, muffled noises, a horrific struggle unfolded over the next hour and a half. Clifford tied Louise's wrists and ankles, gagged her, raped her, started to plan an arson using smoke detectors, but ultimately, at 18:49, he shot her through the back with the crossbow. Cold precision cloaked the violence. At 18:52, Hannah arrived home. Seconds later, she messaged her boyfriend, Alex Klein. "He's tying us up." Her alarm, bravery, and grace in those last moments linger beyond the bullets. Clifford shot her at 18:54 and fled, leaving behind echoes of resistance, defiance, heartbreak.
The street search started when police found the bodies of 3 women at a house in a quiet suburban town of Bushey in Hertfordshire. The victims of a senseless crossbow attack were a mother and her daughters. 25-year-old Louise, her 28-year-old sister Hannah, and their mother, 61-year-old Kyle Hunt. The 3 women are the wife and daughters of Sky Sports racing broadcaster John Hunt.
When the violence finally subsided inside the Hunt family home, the scene was one of devastation. In those brief moments after Kyle Clifford fled, Hannah Hunt, the youngest of the 2 sisters, was still alive. Despite suffering catastrophic injuries, she is believed to have summoned the last reserves of her strength to reach her phone and raise the alarm. Reports later suggested she discovered the bodies of her mother, Carol, and her sister Louise, and tried desperately to make contact with the outside world. In doing so, she gave voice to the terror that had unfolded behind the closed doors of what should have been a sanctuary. Her bravery ensured that emergency services were alerted almost immediately. Police and paramedics arrived at the house on Ashland Close before 19:08. Neighbors recalled seeing flashing blue lights illuminate the otherwise quiet street, the tranquility broken by the urgency of first responders rushing into the property. Inside, they were confronted with the horrific aftermath of Clifford's attack. Despite their rapid arrival and attempts at treatment, Hannah succumbed to her injuries at the scene. For the emergency crews, it was a moment of professional duty colliding with the raw weight of tragedy. The sheer brutality of the attack shocked even those accustomed to dealing with violent crime. With the Hunt women confirmed dead, the focus shifted immediately to locating the suspect. Hertfordshire Constabulary launched a major incident response, mobilizing resources from neighboring forces and coordinating with specialist armed units. Clifford was quickly identified as the prime suspect, Louise's former partner with a known military background, raising concerns about his ability to evade capture and potentially inflict further harm. Warnings were issued to the public not to approach him under any circumstances, describing him as dangerous and likely armed with weapons, including a crossbow. The manhunt intensified overnight, drawing on surveillance, road checks, and aerial searches. Detectives traced Clifford's movements, piecing together CCTV footage and eyewitness reports. By the morning of 10 July 24, attention turned to Enfield in North London, where Clifford was believed to have fled. There, in Lavender Hill Cemetery, armed officers finally cornered him. He was discovered with serious self-inflicted injuries, having apparently turned one of his weapons on himself in a bid to escape justice. Clifford was taken into custody under armed guard and rushed to hospital in critical condition.
Started. This was the moment police found Kyle Clifford, stretchered out of a cemetery in Enfield in North London by police and paramedics. This was the picture they released of Clifford on Wednesday morning in an effort to locate him.
Doctors later confirmed he had been left permanently paralyzed. Though he survived, the consequences of his actions, both for himself and for the family he destroyed, were irreversible. The manhunt had come to a dramatic and tragic conclusion, but for the Hunt family, there would be no resolution, only grief. The wheels of justice began to turn slowly in the aftermath of the Bushey murders. While Kyle Clifford was recovering under police guard from his self-inflicted injuries, detectives painstakingly compiled a case that would leave no room for doubt about his actions on the night of 9 July 2024. The scale of the evidence was staggering. Doorbell footage, CCTV image, forensic material, and most damning of all, the chilling audio recordings taken from inside the Hunt family home. These recordings captured the unfolding terror in the final hours of Carol, Louise, and Hannah's lives. Together, they formed a picture of calculated, premeditated brutality. On 22nd January 25, Clifford appeared at St. Albans Crown Court via video link from his secure hospital facility. There, he entered guilty pleas to 3 counts of murder, as well as to charges of false imprisonment and possession of offensive weapons. The courtroom heard the list of weapons he had accumulated: the compound crossbow and bolts, the butcher's knife, the duct tape, and the rope. All items prosecutors argued demonstrated forethought and a chilling level of preparation. His guilty pleas on these charges spared the Hunt family the pain of reliving every detail of the killings in a full trial. But one charge remained contested: the allegation that Clifford had raped Louise during the prolonged ordeal. He flatly denied it, forcing the matter to trial. For the surviving family members, it meant weeks of renewed anxiety as they prepared to endure another chapter of legal proceedings. That trial began in March 25. The prosecution presented the jury with forensic evidence, including DNA analysis and contextual testimony about Clifford's controlling behavior in the weeks leading up to the murders. Jurors were also reminded of the timeline of events on the day: how Clifford bound Louise, gagged her, and subjected her to further violence before killing her with a crossbow. The defense attempted to cast doubt, but the evidence was overwhelming. After only 3 days of proceedings, the jury retired. Their deliberations lasted a mere 45 minutes, a stark indication of how compelling the evidence was. On 6th March 20th, 25, they returned a unanimous guilty verdict, finding Clifford responsible for the rape of Louise Hunt. The verdict marked another devastating confirmation of the brutality the Hunt family had endured. It underscored the case not just as one of murder, but of sexual violence, coercion, and degradation. For the family, the outcome brought some measure of acknowledgement for Louise's suffering, but no true solace. The guilty verdict set the stage for sentencing, where Clifford would finally face the full weight of the law. March 25. At Cambridge Crown Court, Justice Joel Benathan delivered sentencing. Clifford, absent from court, was handed a whole life order, never to be released.
Possession of an offensive weapon, the crossbow, 1 year's imprisonment, concurrent. For the possession of an offensive weapon, the knife, 1 year's imprisonment, concurrent. For the murder of Carol Hunt, life imprisonment with a whole life order. The early release provisions are not to apply. For the false imprisonment of Louise Hunt, 8 years imprisonment, concurrent. For the rape of Louise Hunt, 20 years imprisonment, concurrent. For the murder of Louise Hunt, life imprisonment with a whole life order. The early release provisions are not to apply. For the murder of Hannah Hunt, life imprisonment with a whole life order. The early release provisions are not to apply.
Describing Clifford as a jealous man soaked in self-pity, who holds women in utter contempt, Benathan painted a portrait of twisted misogyny. Prosecutors had also flagged his exposure to misogynistic media, particularly Andrew Tate content, as fueling his violent mindset. Though much of that contextual evidence was excluded from trial to avoid undue prejudice, Clifford's arsenal, the crossbow, the knife, duct tape, rope, were keys not only to the murders, but to the prosecution's narrative of violent, premeditated destruction. When the legal process finally caught up with Kyle Clifford, the Hunt family's pain was laid bare for all to see. John Hunt, the BBC racing commentator, whose voice had long been familiar to millions of listeners, stepped into the courtroom not as a broadcaster, but as a devastated husband and father. Alongside his surviving daughter Amy, he sat through harrowing testimony, reliving the unimaginable loss of his wife and 2 youngest daughters. At sentencing, John Hunt delivered a victim impact statement that shook the courtroom. His words were not merely about grief, they were an indictment of Clifford's character. He described him as a psychopath, a man capable of disguising himself as an ordinary human being while harboring lethal violence beneath the surface. Hunt's voice, steady but weighted with sorrow, carried a message beyond the trial, that the crime was not just about the family's loss, but about the insidious danger posed by men who mask cruelty behind a veneer of normality. John also spoke of his daughter's courage, particularly Louise, who had found herself face to face with her abuser in the most terrifying circumstances. He praised her for the bravery she showed in resisting, in enduring, and in leaving behind a message for others. Turning to the public, Hunt urged women everywhere to see Louise's ordeal as a reminder. If you feel enough is enough, then it is. It was a plea for self-preservation and empowerment, framed through the tragedy of his daughter's stolen life. The grief of the Hunts rippled outward, touching neighbors, colleagues, and strangers across the country. In Bushey, the quiet town where Carol, Hannah, and Louise had lived and worked, a vigil was held. Hundreds gathered, carrying candles and flowers, their silent presence a testament to the impact the family had on their community. Messages of condolence and prayers were left at the family home, handwritten notes pinned beside bouquets of roses, lilies, and daffodils. Some messages came from friends, others from people who had never met the Hunts, but felt compelled to stand in solidarity. The mourning went beyond Bushey. Across the racing community, colleagues of John Hunt offered their support, pausing live broadcasts to honor his loss. The murders had become not only a personal tragedy, but a national moment of reckoning. In the silence of the vigils, and in the words of John's statement, the memory of Carol, Hannah, and Louise was preserved, not erased by Clifford's brutality, but carried forward by love and remembrance. From the earliest stages of their investigation, detectives and prosecutors concluded that the murders were not the product of an impulsive rage. Instead, they represented a crime of chilling calculation. Kyle Clifford's actions in the days and weeks leading up to July 24 painted the picture of a man who meticulously constructed his plan, step by step. He was not simply lashing out, he was preparing, rehearsing, and equipping himself for domination and destruction. The breakup with Louise Hunt in late June had been the trigger, but investigators stressed that what followed was not grief, but obsession. Clifford's purchases told their own damning story. A high-powered crossbow, a butcher's knife, bolts, rope, duct tape, petrol. Each item was bought with clear intent, each one a tool in a script he had already written. Online searches revealed a mind steeped in control and punishment, seeking ways to stalk, restrain, and ultimately annihilate the family of the woman who had chosen to leave him. Prosecutors described the attack not as vengeance alone, but as an exercise in control. The rape of Louise was cast in court as a calculated act of cruelty, a way to exert dominance over her body and spirit, to punish her for ending the relationship, and to assert power in the most dehumanizing way possible. It was not a spontaneous crime of passion, but a deliberate weaponization of violence, both sexual and physical, designed to degrade before destroying. The evidence was forensic, methodical, and overwhelming. Doorbell cameras captured Clifford's comings and goings. Audio recordings taken from within the home told of the hours-long ordeal, the sounds of restraints being applied, muffled cries, and the cold calm of Clifford moving between acts of violence. Digital records traced his footsteps online, from weapons research to searches about arson, showing not only intent but a frightening level of organization. The Crown Prosecution Service emphasized that Clifford's mindset was rooted in misogyny, a deep contempt for women that manifested in control, coercion, and finally, lethal violence. He was described as a jealous man soaked in self-pity, one who viewed women as possessions and reacted to rejection with annihilation. This pattern was not unique to Clifford, but emblematic of a wider issue: violence against women driven by entitlement and resentment. Piece by piece, the prosecution dismantled any notion of an impulsive outburst. What emerged was a portrait of a man who staged his entry, assembled his arsenal, and executed his plan with chilling precision. In their words, Clifford was not overcome by rage. He was governed by a need for power, a hunger for control that spilled out into unspeakable violence. The Hunt family murders did not exist in isolation. They reverberated far beyond Bushey, sparking a nationwide conversation about gender-based violence and the cultural forces that fuel it. At the heart of the discussion lay an urgent question: how does the breakdown of a relationship become the spark for catastrophic violence? Louise Hunt's decision to leave her partner was an act of independence, yet it became the trigger for premeditated murder. For many, it highlighted the stark reality that women remain most at risk of harm when they assert their right to walk away. The case also ignited debate about the influence of toxic online subcultures. Reports that Clifford consumed misogynistic content, including videos by figures such as Andrew Tate, became a lightning rod for public anger. Some commentators argued these materials emboldened vulnerable or angry men, validating feelings of entitlement and resentment. Others cautioned against simplistic causation, noting that Clifford's violence stemmed from a pattern of control and obsession, not internet content alone. Ultimately, the tragedy forced a broader reckoning. How do communities, law enforcement, and policymakers protect women before violence erupts? And how can society confront the toxic blend of entitlement and misogyny that continues to claim lives with devastating regularity? They were not victims. They were individuals stolen from life's middle chapters. Louise, whose kindness echoed through her grooming, whispered through her final bravery. Hannah, whose strength emerged in terror's face, her final text a cry for help and proof of presence. Carol, whose last act was that of a caring mother trusting humanity. Their lives, condensed but luminous, continue to kindle change, to provoke empathy, to insist on better protections. Their names endure not in statistics, but in the ache they left behind, and in the resolve to prevent even one such silence from ever coming again.